On this episode of the Futures in Digital Learning podcast, we are joined by Tawnya Means, founding partner and principal at Inspire Higher Ed, to discuss human and AI collaboration.
Well, for me, it means making decisions about what piece of a task should be best done by a human and which piece of that task should be best done by a machine or an artificial intelligence. One of the things that I think is really helpful is often when you ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you'll ask a question, it'll come back with a response, and then it'll say, "Would you like me to do
Yeah.
this? Would you like?" And it we need to talk
Mhm.
about bias in the models. We need to talk about, you know, if I say I want a picture of me as a CEO, I have to be, in a suit in an
Right.
office. I mean, there's
Right.
CEOs that don't wear suits and they don't go to offices.
Join us as we talk about how humans and AI interact and the benefits and challenges of working together with AI. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Futures in Digital Learning podcast. My name is Adam Davi. I'm an instructional design manager here at the University of Arizona, and I am joined by a friend of mine, Tawnya Means, the founding partner and principal at Inspire Higher Ed. Tawnya and I have collaborated multiple times through OLC, and I'm very excited to have her on the podcast here. So, Tawnya, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
And I will say one of the reasons that I'm very excited to have you on here today, Tawnya, is because I just started reading your blog that you started recently, which is called the Collaboration Chronicles. Am I getting that
That's
right?
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
and it's about human and AI interaction. And I have enjoyed every piece that you've written. In fact, before recording today, I was just kind of going back and looking through again and getting inspired for this conversation. But I guess to kind of start us off, what does collaboration between humans and AI look like, and what does that kind of mean?
Well, for me, it means making decisions about what piece of a task should be best done by a human and which piece of that task should be best done by a machine or an artificial intelligence. And it's really inspired by something that I've thought about for a very long time, long before we had generative AI, much in the past when we had even just educational technology tools that we were trying to implement into our
Mhm.
teaching in thinking about, well, which things should be done by some software and which things should be really the strength of humans. And so that's really what this collaboration chronicle and my writing is about, is looking for the places where we need to lean into the humanness of our interactions, and sometimes that can be messy and challenging, but
Yeah.
so much fun and rewarding. And then some things that we do that we think that we need a human to do, we really don't, and
Mhm.
they're actually better done by a machine. And so
Okay.
trying to make the best use of every service and every time.
So how does that what does that look like in the world of higher ed and specifically in online learning? How do we kind of adapt to that new way of thinking?
Well, for me, what it means is actually thinking about what we're doing. I
Yeah.
know many of the things that we do, we get kind of in I won't say it's a rut, but it's in a
Hmm.
routine.
Hmm.
And that's okay. It's manageable for our lives to get into a routine of, I meet with a professor, I talk to them about their course, we brainstorm some ideas, I go and do my thing, I build out some content, I go back to the instructor. There's
Hmm.
a flow to how we
Yeah.
typically do our jobs. And in most cases, we are just doing them because that's the next step in the flow. Whereas if we were to sit and think about that process, maybe even map it out, draw a picture of it if that's what it takes, but think about what are the inputs for each of those points? Where is the value that we see out of it? And what are the outputs? And then say, well, is it best to keep it this process? Is this the right process? Is this the
Mhm.
right timeline and flow? Or are there things that we could do differently, think differently, work differently? Are there things that I can, outsource to either other people or to other
Right.
tools? And really just being open to reimagining the process.
I I love that that term that you just used, reimagining the process. I think that that's something that to me AI gives us an opportunity to do, to reimagine things. And I'm a pretty imaginative person, so I'm always trying to, you know, look at things from different perspectives and think about how we could improve, do things better, look at things like that. So, I love that idea, that concept of like, well, yeah, how can we reimagine? How can we make things better in that sense, to look at what the possibilities are. Because right now, like we're faced with this idea that, which is kind of scary, I think, to some people, right? Is like there's a lot of possibility for what can happen. And I think that is can be scary. And that's where like the hesitation is,
Mhm.
with this. So, what would you say to someone that is, maybe afraid to take that leap, and saying like, I don't know if I want to like jump into this world of AI and start using it more, because I'm afraid of what might come of that.
Well, one thing we have to recognize is that AI is here.
Yeah.
There is no putting that toothpaste back in the bottle, the
Right.
genie, in the tube, genie's not going back in the bottle.
Yeah.
It is here.
Yeah.
And I believe that for those who don't address how it relates to them, they're going to
Mhm.
be swallowed up in it. It's going to become overwhelming.
Yeah.
They're I don't know if everyone will be replaced. I think that there will be some job loss and
Hmm.
some job changes, and but the
Right.
same thing happens through every aspect of history when we think about innovations.
Right.
Things change. I
Mhm.
mean, we don't have horses wandering down our streets anymore, and that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The horses are doing other things. So I want to make sure that people recognize that there isn't a going back. We
Mhm.
have generative AI and it is making a significant impact on all of our lives. How that relates to my own personal or your own personal or each individual's own personal journey of how they enter that world is that if you first think, what do I love the most about my job? Or what gives me the most sense of purpose, the most sense of value? And I'll bet you anything that for most people, it's not the minute tweaks of a spreadsheet or the formatting of Word to be able to produce a handout or a document. Those kinds of things aren't the things that make us feel really good about ourselves or
Mhm.
about the work that we're doing for humanity. But if we can articulate what is it that brings you the most value, the most joy,
Mhm.
and then look for either tools that help you do all the other stuff or ways of thinking that help you get to the other stuff faster. Maybe you still
Yeah.
need to create that spreadsheet, but you can create it as a first pass with AI and then come back and tweak it.
Right.
So if we can first articulate what is it that brings us joy, what is it we love, and then recognize where technology can help us do more of what we love and less of the minutia that bogs us down and makes us feel like, gosh, do I have to go to work today kind of feeling.
That's I've never thought about it like that. I like that. Like, yeah, giving us more time to do more of what we love. Um, and I think like you can kind of spin that with students too, as
Mhm.
a tool. I just in my class that I teach this past week, we talked about their passions. What are they passionate about, and how do they kind of fuel that passion while being a student, and how they can incorporate that into their academic journey, even if they're taking a course that's not, in their major that they love or whatnot. Like how do they do that? So I feel like that kind of fits in a little bit with what you're saying. Like, oh yeah, how can we
Absolutely.
use AI to give you more time to kind of fuel that passion and do what you love? Um, and that's a
And I
really
love
cool
that you're
concept.
addressing that with your students
Mhm.
because they are coming into a world where potentially, if we play this right, they could have careers that are more focused on fulfilling their passions.
Yeah,
And so having those conversations while they're students, I think is really valuable.
yeah. Thank you. And I do think it's important. I think you're going to get people, these students are going to come into the workforce and they're going to become, more contributing members of society, and you want them to be able to um, be happy and excited about the work that they're doing, and whatever it is that they're adding to our society. And so that's and to also kind of stoke their creativity a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like they have cool things. I challenge them. I say, like, I don't know how you're using AI. Like, tell me, show me what are you doing that maybe I'm not seeing, that you're saying, like, I think I can use it for this assignment. Like, don't try to hide it from me. Show me what it is so that I can learn from you just as much as you're learning from me in this course.
And I think having that conversation about where they bring value that
Mhm.
can't be found in
Yeah.
AI.
Mhm.
So making it okay
Yeah.
for certain activities or certain tasks that they do where they're not using AI, and
Mhm.
that's okay too.
Mhm. Yeah. I think that's we talk a lot about how, in my role, policies, and what they should, how instructors should build assignments to either encourage AI use or discourage AI use, or things like that. But we don't talk about as much of the creative piece with it,
Mhm.
and as far as well, let's see where this goes, and let's give some students a little bit more autonomy in what
Mhm.
they're doing. And I don't know, like how do we kind of have those conversations, or talk about that more in terms of, like, this is, not the black and white of, like, this is good and this is bad, but this is, like you said, this is here, and let's explore.
Well, you brought up the idea of autonomy.
Hmm.
We know from learning science that agency and autonomy are a big part of
Hmm.
student motivation, right? So
Yeah.
they want to learn if they feel like they have some control of what
Hmm.
they're learning, or they feel like they have some agency to do things in their way.
Yeah.
And we still need to have learning outcomes that we are working toward. We still
Right.
need to have quality expectations for their workload,
Hmm.
the work products. We still need to have expectations around how much effort they put into the work. And we still need them to go through some messy struggles
Hmm.
in order to learn. All of those
Right.
things are valid. So then we start talking about, well, how do we give them more autonomy or more agency? How do we ensure their cognitive effort? How do we help them to value the struggle that comes with learning? And I think a lot of it just comes down to conversations, transparency, talking with them. You're doing that with your students right now. But also, there's an element of accountability, whether that's you and I being accountability partners where we're like, we're experiencing something, let's talk about it and compare notes and hold each other accountable for certain levels of expectations around how our work turns out. But it could also just be, how do you see the relevance of what you're learning in class applying to your future and the value that you will bring to society? And I think a lot of people, whether they're more traditional type of students in the 18 to 22 range right now, or even people who are returning to school to learn something new, to be able to reskill or upskill or change their trajectory in their lives, they all can see relevance.
Right.
And if you're giving them a task and they see no relevance, then the
Hmm.
motivation for them to actually do it well and put their own investment into it is going
Hmm.
to be less.
Yeah.
Whereas if you can say, I know that you're going to be sitting at your desk, your boss is going to walk in and hand you a mess of data and say, make a presentation that I can give to the board. That's
Mhm.
so much more relevant than if they were to, this will never happen, walk in and hand you a Scantron and say, fill in the bubbles.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. And so,
Yeah.
so we need to make, I mean, we've talked for a long time about authentic and assessment.
Hmm.
It needs to be real. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be applicable to what future is going to be. And not every learner knows what their future is going to be. So maybe
Right.
part of it is an exploration process of helping them to figure out what they'll actually do in that job.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the relevance there comes in not necessarily in the content, but the skills that they're building.
Right.
Um, because like you said, AI is not going anywhere. And it's gonna touch, you know, everything that we do, and they're gonna need these skills, these kind of digital literacy skills,
Mhm.
whether that's AI, whether that's, using multimedia in some way, doing these different things that um, are gonna come into play in just about, kind of every role that they could possibly uh, get into.
And the fun thing is you can actually use AI to do that exploration,
Right,
right?
right.
So you can go to one of these LLMs and you can say, tell me what this particular job is going to be like
Yeah,
in 5 years. And it's not going to be exactly on point
right.
accurate, but it's going to do a pretty good job of helping you think through the process.
Hmm. Yeah, and that kind of brings me to another point. In one of the articles you talked about how uh, your son was kind of using AI and able to ask a lot of questions and not have that fear of like, oh, am I doing too much,
Oh,
and
yeah.
having this conversation. And I love that because I think like, yeah, that is powerful.
Well, and it really
It's
got me to thinking about how much has society kind of shaped kids these days into not asking questions,
hmm
not being curious,
Yeah,
being, whether it's parents who are overly pressured to do lots of things and to get them
hmm
to lots of events and activities, or teachers who are like, yeah, I've got so many students, I really can't just
right,
stand here for 45 minutes and have you ask me questions.
right.
Even those of us who have a great deal of care for that individual or want them to feel like they can just
Hmm.
ask us questions forever, that doesn't actually really happen in
Right.
most cases. And so, I mean, my son at one point had even told me, well, I don't want to ask Google that because, I can't even remember how exactly he phrased it, but it was something like, I don't want to be a bother. It's like,
Yeah.
how are you
No,
asking a question to Google being a bother? And he's like, well, but I might have multiple questions. And then it's like, well, now he's got something that he
yeah,
can just ask and ask and ask and ask. And it
yeah.
never comes back and was like, okay, would you
I'm
just get
tired.
it already?
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
it's just, he can just keep asking the questions and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah. And for, and sometimes I know, especially in the higher ed setting, like students don't know where to go to ask these questions, right?
Oh, for
Even
sure.
like if they say like go to a tutor, it's like, well, finding a tutor,
What do I
like getting
ask?
this, like what do I ask the tutor
Yeah.
exactly?
Yep. That's
You
exactly
know?
right. In fact, my daughter said that to me the other day. Because we were talking about a really, complex idea. And I said, well, how come you've never asked this question before? She's like, I didn't know how to ask it or even that I needed to know it.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think that questioning and that the one of the things that I think is really helpful is often when you ask ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, you'll ask a question, it'll come back with a response, and then it'll say, "Would you like me to do
Yeah.
this? Would you like?" And it gives like more options. It's almost like coaching built right in,
Right.
where it's like, "Would you like me to lay that out as a side by side? Would you
Mhm.
like me to, so it
Yeah.
gives more hints of
Yeah.
ways that you can explore a topic further.
Yeah.
And at some point, you're like, okay, I'm done. And you can just walk away. And it
Right.
doesn't get feelings hurt because you're done,
Right.
which is nice.
Right. Or like if something comes up, like you can step away and come back to it and it's gonna
Yeah,
pick up
exactly.
where you left off. Yeah. I was doing something for work this past year and I went on to Claude and I asked questions and it gave me a wireframe for a potential website. And I didn't like think about that. I didn't ask for it. It just kind of took what I was doing and it did it and it spit this out. And I was like, oh, that's that's great. Okay, this is
Yeah.
helpful. All right. Well, now let me ask, like, can you adjust this and move this here and like, and so yeah, it did give like help me see things in a way and go down a different direction that I didn't expect to go down. Um,
I
it,
also
you
like
know,
when I get a response and I'm like, I don't really, two things. Either I don't really understand what you're asking,
mhm,
what you're suggesting. Like I
right.
don't have enough knowledge to know whether or not that's right. And being able to come back and say, "Can you explain that to me further? Can you tell me what this particular reference means? Can you help me to understand why you suggested this?" So that's one track. But the
Yeah.
other track is coming back and saying, "That's not my view. That's not my perspective.
Mhm,
Can you reframe it given this?"
yeah.
And it will rewrite it. And then I'll be like, "Oh, that's closer, but not quite. What about this?" And I
Yeah.
can bring in different ideas that further enhance that idea in a different direction,
Yeah.
and nobody's getting their feelings hurt or being offended or saying you're
Right.
walking all over my thing, or it just allows me to flex and shape
Mhm,
until I get something that I really buy into or that I
right.
really like.
Yeah. And it's still using your ideas and what
Mhm.
your like your thoughts to kind of help you shape that,
Yeah,
which
because
I
the
think is
first
really cool.
thing it put out was crap.
Right.
It's like, no, that's not what I want.
Right.
Do this. What about this? I mean, I almost sit and go through probably, 70 different iterations with Claude
Yeah.
saying, no, fix this. No, change this. No, do this. None of this. And
Yeah.
it's fine. It
I
can
can
keep
do
going.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's nice to have that. You're not sending it back to the same person over and over again saying, "Okay,
Right.
like look at this next draft. Like can you revise this? Like how does this sound?"
Yeah.
Um, which is a lot. Um, so um I guess okay, so that kind of leads to another question is, do you envision a time when AI could co-teach courses alongside humans?
I think it is already. And here's
Okay.
why I say that. If I, as an instructor, have a course that I've
Mhm,
built out and I
mhm,
have students who are in that course, and those students are using generative AI in some way
mhm,
to learn or do activities in that course. I read an article and I can't remember, I'm sorry, where exactly it was, but it was basically an article that said your students are already rewriting your content. So if they don't
okay.
understand something you're saying, they're going and they're asking AI, whether they're asking Google or they're asking ChatGPT, they're getting an AI response
Right.
to better understand what you're asking them for.
Okay.
If they feel like what you're giving them isn't enough or is too
Mhm,
much, they're either summarizing or they're getting additional insights through a
right.
tutor or something like that. So I think without officially stating I have a co-teacher who is an AI, it's already happening.
Okay.
Now, do I think that we'll have courses or content that is officially, Tawnya Means instructor and Biff the AI as co-instructor? I don't know if we'll ever get to that place, but I do think that there is a value in considering what that would look like and
Mhm.
why we would do it. What would be the value? Well, the
Right.
value could be that, you know, it's bringing in expertise from so many different sources that I don't have time to go to uh,
Mhm.
uh, you know, conglomerate all that together. That's not the word I'm looking for. I can't think of the word at the moment, but
Yeah.
you know, am I going and curate? There's the word I'm thinking of.
There you go.
So am I looking for a tool that can help me curate information to
Hmm.
provide to my students, and then I'm the face that builds a relationship with them,
Right.
helps them to have that motivation to learn, encourages them, but then maybe I'm also using some AI type tools to give them faster feedback or to help the content be more accessible or to give them spaced practice,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. Um, I think they all bring value to the learning process,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that then means that I actually have to have Jill Watson as my instructor that everybody thinks is a person but isn't, and then finds out
Right.
later and is disappointed.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Um, that's interesting, right? Like this idea that it's kind of already happening without officially happening.
Right.
But um,
So let me suggest something here.
mhm,
If I talk to 15 of my colleagues and each one of them brings up an insight that I think is valuable and I write it down by hand, and then I take all of those notes and I use them kind of to spark my own thinking, and I write an article based on my conversations with those 15 colleagues. And would I then list all of the 15 colleagues that I talked to by name and specific situation in saying, I wrote this article based on these 15 different conversations, and here's what
mhm,
I thought based on what so and so said, and then I connected to that. We wouldn't
mhm.
do that in most cases.
Right.
But if I have a conversation with an AI that is bringing together 150 different ideas,
Mhm.
and I'm prompting it and going back and forth and thinking about it and writing something, is there an expectation that I would then cite that AI, or is there an expectation that I would go and try to track down those 150 sources that the AI brought together?
Right.
Or is there a recognition that there's really nothing new in the world? And that everything we say and everything we do
Hmm.
is based off of inspiration from somewhere,
Right.
from someone, from some conversation we had, from
Right.
some experience we had. Maybe I experienced something 15 years ago that all of a sudden connected to something that I've done today. You know, we need to have, I think, a recognition that everything comes from somewhere.
Hmm.
And in most cases, it didn't come purely from my own head.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think, I could say the same for course design, right? If,
That's
when
right.
I'm designing a course, if I'm asking my colleagues like, hey, what would you do, with this assignment? Or like we're trying to like figure this out. What tool would you use? How could you do it? Like, um, and
And
again, I'm
every course that you have developed in the
mhm,
past is leading
is
you to
right.
what you expect this current course that you're
Hmm.
building should look like, or
Yeah.
how it should function, or what
Hmm.
service it should offer, or
Right.
what value it brings. You're not going to go and at the bottom of that course say built off of the 150 other
Right.
courses we've built, right?
Right.
But it
Exactly.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, we just
Yeah.
can't, as humans, we can't not take into consideration all of the influences around us.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So kind of touching off of that idea of, influence, thinking about myths surrounding AI in education. What is a myth that you would like to debunk
Oh, fun.
if you could?
Um, well, there's a few.
Mhm,
One is I think there's an expectation that at some point a teacher, educator, mentor is no longer going to be valuable.
mhm.
And I completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Sal Khan in his book um, had a perfect line. I even posted about it on LinkedIn because I loved how he said it. He's like, teachers are only going to become more valuable.
Yeah.
So I don't think we're writing educators out of the equation.
Right.
So that's the first one. The second one is I don't think that there's ever going to become a time where a learner can't learn something more.
Mhm.
And, I think in some cases, we've had an educational system that was check these boxes, get this piece of paper, and then go do this job.
Right.
And that's the process.
Mhm.
If we could change to more of an expectation of, I'm always learning something new, I'm
Yeah.
always gaining new understanding, I'm always seeing things in a different light, then learning just becomes, I mean, it already is, but we just don't recognize it. Learning just becomes a part of everything we do,
Yeah.
living and breathing and learning, and they're just all kind of part of life. And so when we think about AI, when we think about expectations that people have around it, it's kind of, in some ways, I think some people have this, it's either it's right or it's wrong.
Mhm.
That's why we get into the concerns about hallucinations, right?
Right.
You need to go and verify all these sources because AI can hallucinate. Or you see at the bottom of everything from, Gemini can be wrong, ChatGPT can be wrong, Claude
Right.
can be wrong. Well, yes, so can people,
Right.
and it's based off of people.
Right.
So everything can be wrong. And even, now 2 plus 2 is always 4. And I don't care how many times ChatGPT tries to convince you that it can be 5 if you want it to be 5. That's
Yeah.
not true. But the idea of hallucinations and the idea of everything's not black and white. I hope we can at some point get beyond that expectation
Mhm.
to recognize that there's a great amount of value of things being gray or things being
Mhm.
not on or off.
Yeah.
Um, but transparency is really important there. So
Mhm.
I posted about this on LinkedIn. It's like, wouldn't it be great if AI could come back with you to you and say, well, I can't find any articles specifically related to topic X, but wouldn't it be great if somebody wrote an article called this?
Yeah.
And instead of making it up and
Yeah.
saying that go find this article, which doesn't exist, no, but that'd be a great article to write
Yeah.
and a great area of study to do. And so maybe training AI platforms to be more able to be transparent, to be able to say, well, there doesn't seem to be any information about that, but great if it'd be great if it was.
Mhm.
Or I've read this website and it doesn't say, or I can't find where it says this. Can you help me find it? Because I know
Yeah.
how there have been multiple times where I've said, use this website to articulate this thought. And
Yeah.
it'll say, oh, it doesn't say anything about that on the website. Yes, it does. Screenshot, screen capture. It's right here.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. It's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
so instead of trying to get these large language models to present things as hard facts, instead get it to present it as, well, I didn't see it. Can you help me?
Right.
That kind of response.
Yeah. And then, have that conversation about our own like thinking process, right? To go through. And I, I've kind of talked about this with people as when ChatGPT first kind of burst on the scene and all these LLMs started becoming more prevalent. And I said, we went through this this shift when calculators kind of came out, right? And
Yeah.
people stopped having to do math by hand and they could do it on calculators. And everybody said, oh, we're going to ruin you know, the way people think that it's going to be so easy for them to just do it, do it on a calculator. Um, and then, we kind of got through that part. And even then, like I remember there's times where you could enter something, an equation in a calculator one way and get one answer and enter it in a different way and get a different answer. And, and those type of kind of anomalies with the calculator as well, right? And then, Wikipedia came and it was like, oh, this is, such ease of access to information. Oh, but you can't trust any of it because it's entered by humans. And you don't know what's real and what's not, and anybody can put anything on Wikipedia. Um, but it's still, you know, was a valuable source of kind of information and that people went to and use and still use, right?
Right.
And so like, kind of, and now this is the to me the next kind of thing. And not to equate all of those as being completely similar, but like that idea of like there's always something that kind of comes around. And this obviously was going to have, maybe greater impacts of what it can and can't do compared to those other tools. But it's a lot of kind of the same types of conversations
Mhm.
that surround it. And, how do we adjust to this as a new part of our world? And what are the impacts it's going to have?
And I think it's you started to say something that really resonated with me in this idea of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
evaluating our thinking. I
Hmm.
think we haven't maybe put as much into how we think what we think,
Yeah.
or where things come from,
Hmm.
or why I have this particular perspective, or why your perspective is different from my perspective, or
Yeah.
where there's overlap, or where there's you know untenable differences. I mean,
Right.
we haven't really done that. And
Right.
so if we're able to have tools that help us, give me a different perspective, give me a different idea, give me three alterations of this. Maybe it'll help us to think more about thinking. I mean,
Yeah.
from an educational perspective, pedagogical perspective, we've learned about metacognition, thinking about
Hmm.
thinking, but most people don't do that.
Right.
Like, why do I hold this particular belief or
Right.
thought process? Well, I don't know. It just is.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should think about it. And maybe if we're
Yeah.
not doing some of the minutia, we can dig down into that and think a
Yeah.
little bit more about it and talk a little bit more about it. And that I think that's valuable.
I agree. I completely agree. And I think these are good conversations to be having um and good ways to I think look at the positive and as opposed to what I kind of refer to as the Terminator outlook, where it's we're afraid that it's going to take over and destroy all the humans um and send us into an apocalyptic future.
Well, and then that's actually an interesting point to bring up as well. For all of my um, positive and aspirational and hopeful potential for the future, there are definitely things that we need to talk about. There
Yeah.
are dangers, there are risks, there are um, ethical
Mhm.
concerns,
Right.
and we need to talk about those. We need to talk
Hmm.
about bias in the models. We need to talk about, you know, if I say I want a picture of me as a CEO, I have to be, in a suit in an
Right.
office. I mean, there's
Right.
CEOs that don't wear suits and they don't go to offices.
Right.
Or it makes you a male when
Right.
you're female, or there are definitely challenges and
Hmm.
risks and even dangers
Hmm.
associated with what could happen with AI. I really appreciate some of the work that Anthropic is doing around those ethical conversations and trying to figure out, and others are doing it too. I'm not trying to single anyone out, but
Hmm.
when we want to use a tool to augment so much of what our society will be, we need to have those conversations and we need to evaluate, is this right? Is this in the best interest of humans and not just in the
Right.
best interest of,
Of capitalism.
well, not to say there's anything wrong with capitalism either,
Right.
but recognizing that it needs to serve a good.
Right.
It needs to be good for society. It needs to
Hmm.
be, something that makes us better instead
Right.
of just something that either is used for control, or used for nefarious purposes, or used to benefit one group over another.
Right.
So I think it's important for us to have those conversations, and I appreciate everyone who brings those up. I don't want it to be fear mongering, though. I
Right.
don't want it to
Right.
be like the world is going to end.
Yeah.
It's not, but
Yeah.
I can see where you're afraid, and
Mhm.
let's talk about your fears
Yeah.
and how to address them.
Right. And that's important to like, to be able to have those open and honest conversations to address fears, but in a
Mhm.
way that is productive and not,
Yeah,
like you said, not just fear mongering, where we're, just kind of dismissing it as something that, can't happen for fear of ruining society.
yeah,
But it's like there's positives and negatives for anything. Um, we could do the same for anything that has come up, air travel
yeah,
and and heck, going to the shopping at the grocery store, right? Like, all of these things have kind of these positives and negatives that we can talk about in different ways. But
right.
uh, so yeah, I think it is good to continue having these conversations. That's why I'm grateful to you for being able to come on and talk with us on the podcast about some of these things and you know continue those conversations.
Absolutely. It's always so fun to think about and talk about and collaborate with other people, and it always leads to more opportunities for more things in the future. So
Agreed. Agreed.
appreciate the
And
opportunity.
yeah, so I think that's a good place to kind of end, and we'll leave people with things to think about, and hopefully we can come back and have more of these conversations in the future as well. So
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
awesome. All right, thank you, Tanya. And for listeners, please check out her blog on Substack. We'll post a link in the notes for this episode. And yeah, thanks again for joining us.
The Futures of Digital Learning podcast is a production of the University of Arizona University Center for Assessment, Teaching, and Technology. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas you'd like to share with our office, go to the Contact Us link on our website, ucatt.arizona.edu.